and welcome everybody to tonight's Truth Proof live stream. Now, I hope you've all had a good week, and I'm going to say thanks to everybody who's come onto the stream tonight, and I see lots of names in the chat. Yeah, you know, you seem really loyal to a lot of the work that Paul does and the way that we deliver it. And I'm just going to say at the start, I know Paul was going to bring it later on, but just the style of the live streams, put in the chat whether you think we should do a 2-hour run or 2 1-hour runs in a week. So it's just how it works probably for you, for viewing. Obviously we'll have different topics on the second one in the week. And yeah, just let us know in the chat what format you'd like. And so, without saying any more on that, I've got to say thank you for. Let's have a look, Alison, for doing the moderating tonight. And I'm really sorry to hear that Sky is not very well tonight. So I think she would have been doing it. Sky Flower, who is usually in the chat and moderating. She's also hope everybody wishes her good health there. You get better. Without rambling on too much, I am going to go through the names I can see in the chat, and I do leave some names out. I'm sorry about that, but the names I can see tonight are let's have a look: Rod, Kim Kin, Branch Snapper, Ian Linford, Lisa Rod, welcome Lisa, and of course Alison doing the moderating. Mally Dodgson, welcome Mally. Yeah, Stargazer Eternal, and Steph J is in the chat tonight, and Galba, and they were saying this should be good. Well, it is good, I can tell you. And David Drummond, we have got Shane is in the chat tonight, and he's just said hello. So hello to Shane, and welcome to the show. Right, I'll just see if I can pick some more that I may have missed. Probably missed loads actually, but Alan Wolster. Did I say Karen Taylor? Michael Cameron, and let's have a look. The Revenants, good supporter of the show, and you know, welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy it tonight. And Nigel Logan, did I mention you, Nigel? Rocky Nuisance is in the chat. I won't go on too far because there is a lot of you in the chat. The Disabled Welshman is in the chat, and Nick Exploration. Thanks for joining us. Thanks everybody for joining us actually. So from the UK, from East Yorkshire, in fact, everybody welcome to tonight's show. Now, unfortunately, our intro file won't play, so I've discovered a little bit earlier on. So it'll be straight to Paul to introduce tonight's guest. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Les. And it's some come round, and yeah, thanks for putting that out about whether we should be doing 1 hour or 2 hours or 2 1 hours. You know, sometimes, you know, that it might be more appropriate, but more importantly, tonight's guest, Colin Saunders. Really looking forward to talking with Colin. I first met him at the OLM conference just after COVID, where he gave an absolutely incredible presentation. He did tell us he was a bit nervous, but it didn't come over that way at all. Now, a little bit about Colin. He spent most of his life working within design within the aircraft industry, and prior to what he's going to talk about tonight, Colin had, I would like to, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, no interest in the unexplained at all. But all of that changed, and he went from experiencer to researcher, and now, more importantly for us guys tonight, the author of Triangular UFOs within the United Kingdom. So we're going to find out a little bit about the contents of the book and Colin's own personal experience. So Colin, welcome to Truth Proof.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to come and have a chat with you, Paul. I'm looking forward to it.
And just before we get into the contents of the book and your own sighting, a little bit of background about you, Colin, prior to this.
Yes, basically I was born in the Midlands, grew up most of my time in Hinckley in Leicestershire, and when I left school I became an electrical design draftsman. I decided at one point I wanted to try and work overseas. I fancied travelling, and contract drafting seemed to be the way to go. So my first proper contract was in Germany, in Hamburg, working on the Airbus, the A300, A310, quite a long time ago. But I was basically drafting on the fuselage electrical control systems. So having spent a year in Germany, I went off to New Zealand. I spent 18 months in New Zealand working for a company called Refrigeration Engineering, which was quite an interesting job. And I travelled all around the country and spent 6 months in the South Island as well. Then I came back to the UK, and for a short while, well, another 12 months, I worked for Chevron Petroleum in the North Sea. Although I was based onshore at Aberdeen, I used to have the occasional trip out to the platform. Now that in itself was a great experience, because we were flying from Aberdeen to Unst in the Shetlands on a small takeoff and landing de Havilland aircraft, and then a large Sikorsky from Unst out to the Ninian field to the central platform. And I did some work once on the northern platform and had to fly between the platforms on a small Volco 3-seater helicopter. So that was a great experience.
Well, a bit frightening, I think, would it?
A little bit, yeah. The helicopters are very frightening. They tend to fly quite close to the sea because they have a habit of falling out of the sky. There's always accidents in Aberdeen, so they used to be quite low down for that reason. I do remember, actually, although it's nothing to do with UFOs, we did leave the platform one day, and they were trying to fly the helicopter close to the sea, but there was mist covering all of the sea. So he rose up above the mist, but then above us there were clouds. So we ended up in this corridor flying back to Aberdeen. It was all lit up with oranges and purples. It was a fantastic sight, absolutely incredible. Yeah. So after the year in Aberdeen, I got a contract in Sweden with Saab Aerospace, based in Linköping, which is sort of central Sweden. They make fighter aircraft. They make the Gripen. In the early days, they made the Viggen and the Vegan, but they also manufactured a 34-seat civilian aircraft, and that was the project that I was involved with. I spent 2 years in Sweden. Lovely country, lovely people. I spent 12 months working in the cockpit, doing overhead control panels and center console, doing wiring drawings as well as mechanical installations and manufacturing drawings. The next 12 months I spent working on the wings and the engines and horizontal and vertical stabilizers, but again as an electrical draftsman. So the 2 years I was there, that was quite exciting. I enjoyed that job, best job I ever had.
Do you know, Colin, sorry for butting in there, but because I think this is important, you know, because I know a lot of people will listen to live streams and they want to hear about, I don't know, the landed UFO and the occupants, but you've just given us a breakdown, a background of your work, and it's going to be telling when you start talking about what you saw and experienced. And quite honestly, I think it was quite life-changing. But am I right in thinking, Colin, that prior to the event, I know I said it earlier, so I think I am, that you'd never had any UFO experience or any interest in the subject before that? That's right,
yeah. I'd been to see Star Wars at the pictures back in 1980 something, but I had no interest in UFOs after that. The reason I talk about my engineering background, because it does make a difference to the sighting, especially when I worked in the Aberdeen. You know, when we used to go offshore to do drawings, we'd be there for a week. Once I got back on shore, I had to draw everything up that I'd been out to have a look at. Now, if you got it wrong, you can't just hop on an airplane and go back over to the platform again. That just doesn't happen. And as a professional, you're paid to get it right. Yeah. So the way I was doing the observations, the way I was trained to do everything, came in really handy on the night of the UFO, because I tried to put as much information into my head as I could at the time of the sighting. And then as soon as we got back home, we all did our drawings and started to reproduce what we had seen. Where was I? I came back from Sweden after a couple of years for the birth of my daughter, actually, Victoria. Otherwise, I would have stayed in Sweden a little bit longer. But my wife got pregnant with our first daughter, so I came back to the UK. I got a job then working at Courtaulds in Coventry, a company called Amtico, a subsidiary called Amtico.
So what year are we then, Colin? Where are we now?
We're now in the 80s, 1985.
So you're painting a picture which has always been within design and the aircraft industry.
Always, yes.
And obviously traveling to oil rigs. I've just jumping back to the oil rigs. Sorry, traveling back by aircraft overseas and what have you. Did anybody ever speak about any sightings or anything like that?
No,
well,
no,
never.
No, never. I mean, I hadn't had a sighting, so I wasn't asking the questions. If I went back through my life and my career again, I'd be asking all the pilots.
You'd be asking those
I
questions.
would do now, yes, yeah.
So jumping to your book then, Colin, and we'll get into some of the accounts later. You've got around 130, is it, first-hand accounts within the book?
That's right. There's over 130 different sightings from different people of more or less close encounters, majority of them with triangular shaped craft.
And people, we need to stress that we are talking triangular shaped UFOs within.
That's right. Yes. Obviously, because we had our experience with a triangle, that was my main interest. So after the experience, I started researching triangles, and I became sort of obsessed with triangles, if you like, and people who have had contact with triangles. I was trying to find out who the occupants of the craft were, whether they were greys or reptilians, and I still don't know to this day exactly what type of being was on board the craft. If there was anybody on board the craft, it may have been remotely flown. Who knows? We don't really know all of the answers.
Do you know, you make a really good point, Colin, and I think I like that kind of honesty, and I don't mean because I kind of think on them lines, but the things that I experienced through childhood and the people I've spoken to this present day, I've still got no idea what their agenda was, where they were from. I've just got absolutely no clue. All I know is it happened, and it's good that you're not saying I think they are from here or there. You're just forming opinions based on what you've seen. Now, obviously, hopefully we'll touch on to some of the 130 witness accounts within the book, but would you like to just jump right into your experience and be as detailed as you like? We've got a few hours to cover this, so it doesn't matter if this takes 45 minutes or an hour. I'm sure that our listeners would be fascinated.
Yes. So,
Colin, and then I butt in. Apologies. We would love questions directed to Colin tonight in block capitals, please. I'm sure Alison and Les have already stressed that, but let's have some questions for Colin or myself, and Les will get them out, within 45 minutes of the hour. But block capitals, please. Over to you, Colin. Sorry.
Okay, so right to jump back to my last job that I had, proper job, if you like, employed by Courtaulds. A design office manager, and I was designing floors, like I say, for a company called Antico, and they were exciting design floors. I'd always been electrical prior to that. But what happened during the course of the time there, I caught chicken pox off my daughter, and that really knocked me about, and it turned into post-viral fatigue syndrome, or ME, as they called it in the day, the yuppie disease, and I lost my job. I tried for 12 months to try and recover, and I ended up starting my own business. Now, this proved to be fantastic because just a few years into my own business, I'm still working at home. I built it up. I've got 2 designers working for me. What I was doing was embroidery origination. So we've got a couple of embroidery machines. This is all in the dining room at home. And I got a self-contained business. Now, this was perfect because when I had the encounter, which we'll go through in a second,
that's all good.
I could relax after that. I couldn't concentrate on work. So fortunately, I got all the staff in place to do the work, keep the business running, whilst I was in the shed in the garden making models. It was just crazy, but it just came at the right time, if you like. If I'd still been working at Courtaulds, I would have had to have gone to work the next day. I don't know how I would have coped with that. So we go to the sighting, the 31st of March, 1999. We'd been out for a family meal. There was 8 of us in total in 2 cars. I was in a car with my wife. She was driving. My mother-in-law, whose birthday it was that day, and my daughter, who was 12. Me and my daughter were sitting in the back of the car. We left the White Line at Pailton, which is in Warwickshire, in the countryside, and drove along the country lanes until we came to the Fosse Way. The Fosse Way is an old Roman road, for those of you who are into ley lines, and the Fosse Way goes up to High Cross, where it joins the A5 and the Watling Street, another Roman road. And from there we go back to Hinckley. Now, as we came up to the junction of the Fosse Way, my daughter, funnily enough, said there'd been talk of headless horsemen down the foss, and we all laughed and joked, said, "Oh, we'll keep our eyes open, see if we can see him." And then, as soon as we turned the corner onto the foss, there, right in front of us, half a mile away, were these lights flashing away by the side of the road. The most brilliant lights I've ever seen in my life. And I love fireworks. I love going to firework displays. These were amazing. They were like laser lights. They were red and a bit of white mingled in. And we were all going, "Wow, what on earth is that? There's too many lights for airplane and helicopter." And we've been up and down the Foss Way for years. We've never seen anything. You'd expect to see some pylons at this time with the lights on the top to warn aircraft away. That was the thing that came through my mind. That's the only thing I could think of. And we drove towards these, all talking excitedly about them. Now, there's no street lights, there's no buildings, there's nothing. We're absolutely in the middle of nowhere on this road, and there's no other vehicles and no other craft in the sky.
How big, Colin? How big spaced apart these lights?
Well, eventually, I'd say the craft was the size of a house. The base of it is probably the size of a bus, you know, maybe 30 feet or 10 meters across. But initially, there was no craft. It was just lights suspended in the sky. So all we were thinking about was the lights. I had no idea there was going to be anything attached to them. We drove up to the lights, exactly half a mile away, because the next day I'd been back and measured the distance. So once we drew parallel with the lights, I would say they were 100 feet away. Now I base that on steering my friends narrowboat around the Asper Canal, which is 70 foot long. So when I say 100 feet, I mean 100 feet. I could hit it with a cricket ball easily.
Do you know, Colin, this is why it was so good for you to give that description of your previous working experience, because people will appreciate that you're giving these distances, these approximations, and you'll be pretty accurate with them, won't you?
I will, yes. I'm very accurate with my dimensions, funnily enough. I suppose having years of experience of being a draftsman. So we pulled up underneath the lights, so we're staring at the lights. Now, it was strange because the lights were not level with the earth, they were tilted. So if I show you on this first model that I built, this is a hand-built model. It was tilted at an angle like this, and we're at the back here looking at these lights. I had a theory why it was tilted at an angle, by the way. But anyway, as we stopped underneath the lights and we were staring at them, all of a sudden I could see the sky start to ripple around the outside. It was almost like it was just rippling, like heat haze on a road, for instance. And I thought that was the first time I thought, my God, there's something there. There's something around the lights. It's not just lights. Because up until that point, I just thought there were balls of light in the sky. Yeah. But once the sky started rippling around the outside, the back edge. So if we were looking at the rear end, what we saw was basically the outline starting to come into view. But the nose was also tilted down slightly. Now you can just see the perspective there of a diamond. So as it became solid, it initially looked like a diamond shape, but that was because the nose was slightly tilted down as well. As soon as I see it start to ripple, and I thought, my God, there's something there. It was almost like instant. It just became a solid metallic triangle. Now, the amazing thing was it was that low to the ground that if it had turned from the middle of the craft, if it had tilted, it would have struck the ground. It was that low. So the rear end stayed where it was, and the nose rose up in the air like that, like a horse rearing up in front of you, which then gave a perfect view of the top surface.
I'm sorry for cutting in, but what was the reaction in the car?
I think it was one of amazement, but I would say that me and my mother-in-law, we wanted to get on board. We were so excited. We wanted to get out of the car. Unfortunately, it was a two-door car, so I couldn't get out. I was in the back. I had to wait until we got out the front. Now, my wife, who was driving, is very sensible. What she did, a sensible person, a sensible driver. So we stopped on the middle of the Foss Way, looking at the lights. So she decides to pull forward and reverse into a gateway, which is more or less underneath where the triangle is hovering. But unfortunately, she pulled forward. There was a big hedge that blocked the view, and I thought to myself, oh no, if it's going to go, it's going to go now. So we reversed into the hedge, jumped out of the car. Sure enough, it had gone. There were no smell of any aviation fuel. There were no cars around, no other airplanes, apart from one. And we stood there and looked into the distance, and there going away was the biggest craft I've ever seen. And I've been to a few air shows, and I've worked on quite a few aircraft. This thing was massive, like one of them football pitch sized craft. Now, the reason I thought it was the same craft, I say that in inverted commas, is because you've got these four big red lights on the back. the same as the small craft we've just seen in front of us. Now that is not normal for an aircraft. I've never seen it on an aircraft before. I've only seen it on the triangle that was in front of us. But this thing was massive, and on the end of the wingtips was a white light that lit up the top surface, but they weren't strobing. So you'd only see that massive triangle from the top. I assume it was a triangle because the thin wings came along and then came up almost exactly the same as the back of our triangle, except it was a lot longer. It was like 1,000 feet across instead of like 30 feet across. And that was going away from us. From underneath, you wouldn't even have seen it because the lights on the top were not shining through on the bottom from where we could see. But I would say it was probably half a mile away, maybe more, disappearing into the distance. Now, in the original report to Omar Fowler, he asked me why I thought it was extraterrestrial. I said that it had changed shape. It had gone from a small one to a big one. Now, that's because I knew nothing about UFOs. I wasn't involved in the subject. As soon as I started researching, I realised I've never heard of it before, but motherships. It was a mothership.
You're thinking there's more than one?
Yeah, so now I believe the small craft must have gone back to the larger craft. I'm pretty certain that's what took place. And the interesting thing about that is that I asked my wife, well, all of us, to draw what we'd seen. So me and my daughter drew the triangle with the beams on the surface. Oh yeah, because I've not described that yet, have I? I'll use
lots of time. It's all good.
I'll use this other model that I've got here. I'll just switch the lights on. This is the latest 3D printed model that my friend made for me. So this is a beauty, this one. Now on the surface here, hopefully you can see.
Is that the one that you said you're going to give me, Colin?
I don't think so. The paintwork on it is £300. This is an expensive craft, this is. He's made 4, but this is the only finished one. He's got 4 in bits that I keep trying to persuade him to build, but he's not done it yet. Now, if you look at the surface of this craft, when it tilted up in front of us like this, reared up like a horse, you can see the surface. It's like liquid mercury. It got waves running up and down it. Now, on top of those waves were these silver interlocking beams, but they weren't distorted. So the effect on the surface that looked like water or like rippling was not heat haze or electromechanical effect, electromagnetism, because these beams on the top were solid. So I'm pretty certain that liquid was like in a transparent skin, and it looked like it was flowing up and down.
And this is a black liquid we're looking at then?
Grey,
graphite type. Yep.
And the best way I can describe it as well is that if you think of a lake at night, it's got a slight breeze on it and the moon shining on it and the waves catch the moonlight.
Yeah. That oscillation.
That's exactly how it looked on the surface. But like I say, the beams themselves were solid and they were not...
just not to throw you off, because I'm hoping you can pick up straight away, but you know, back in 2009 when I were researching Wilsthorpe and the UFOs that were seen over the sea at Wilsthorpe, I got lots of reports, and there was a guy from York who contacted me. Really good report. I think I put it into Truth Proof 3, and he talked about going outside his property and just looking up at the sky, and he can see coming towards him, and it wasn't dark. He described it, I'm not a Star Wars fan, people, as looking like the Millennium Falcon. So some people, we're talking about a triangle, but we're not talking about a perfect equilateral triangle, I'm assuming. And it went low over the top of him, over the top of his property. But he described it as looking like molten rolled steel. And now I know that you're not talking about glowing red, but you're talking about this rippling effect. And it had a profound effect on him. He thought lots of people would see it. He did tell me that his wife was a nurse, and she went to work the next day, and a nurse within their ward said, I saw a UFO last night, and she was speaking about it. So someone else did see this. But this molten rippling effect, it's almost like it's a living thing. That's what struck me when he said it. But I know you're going to get to that, Colin, so sorry to distract you. So if you can pick up from where you were, I'm sorry to just throw that in, people, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, funnily enough, I do have a report in the book from a gentleman who lives 4 or 5 miles from where we live, who had a triangle come over him one night when he was out in the garden having a cigarette. And he said the cloaking system on it didn't seem to be working very well, because it was like half cloaked. You could see half of the craft and half of it was invisible. And he said to himself, he thought that's not a very good cloaking system. And I've got his report in the book.
Do you think they make mistakes, Colin?
They must do now and again, like, you know, if they do crash, and Roswell is obviously an example of that. One assumes that was a genuine crash site, then occasionally they
it
will
might have
make
been a genuine crash site, but was it deliberately crashed to give us something to advance our development? You know?
possibly, yeah. I mean, the next day after our encounter, I expected everybody to know about it. I didn't think we'd be the only people to see it that night. I thought the whole world would know, but it wasn't in the newspapers, it wasn't on the television. I phoned the local airports, nobody had seen anything. But I did realise that day that obviously other people see these things, because when I went onto the internet to do research, I was amazed to see that triangles were like a common UFO. If I was going to make a story up like this, I would have said it was a flying saucer. I wouldn't have said it was a triangle, because I've never even entered my mind that a triangle could be a UFO, a triangle-shaped UFO. So,
I know you're still advancing and we're still getting the story, but I'm sorry for throwing you these little one-liners in, but this changed everything for you. You said that luckily you were working at home, you'd got some other staff working for you, so you could concentrate on documenting everything in detail that you'd seen. What did the staff think? What did your friends think? And we'll jump back to sighting, because people will probably be shouting at me for interrupting you. But
well, strangely enough, everybody went with it. And the next day, of course, is April Fool's Day. So customers are turning up, and I'm telling them, even in the morning, because I think April Fool's only lasts in the morning, doesn't it? But I couldn't help but tell everybody about it. And everybody went with it. There was hardly anybody who knocked me for it. Everybody said, and in fact, a few people actually said, because it's you, we believe you. Because you're an honest, genuine guy, you make a good witness. If you've seen it, we believe you've seen something. But I know from my experience years ago, I know a guy I knew from school that apparently had a UFO experience. It was common knowledge amongst everybody. So he was the first guy I phoned the next day to say, Reese, you never guess what I've seen. And he goes, a UFO. I goes, yeah. And he goes, was it triangular? I said, how do you know that? I said, well, because mine was triangular. So that was quite a coincidence. But to get back to the decloaking, yeah, I think these crafts are flying around cloaked all the time, and if they want to be seen, they make themselves visible, and they seem to be able to disappear at will. They're such an amazing vehicle.
which is true, and we'll providing you don't mind, and I'm not just going to distract you from telling us this story. Hunnaby, 1998. Yours were 1999, and there were a series of events. It were a mixture of lots of paranormal and unexplained activity taking place. But the night before the flying saucer landed, the guys in the compound saw 3 triangular UFOs coming from the sea, which would be about 2 to 3 miles away. And it'll relate to what you've just said. And they can't believe what they're seeing. It's dark, but it's a star-filled night, and these things, they can see them bold and black in the sky coming towards them. There's the principal witness who worked at Hunnaby, and 2 guys from another industrial unit stood having a cigarette. And just when they think they're going to get these things right over the top of them, they're gone. They're switched off. It were almost like they'd never been there. So I don't know whether they cloaked themselves because they said they could see stars and everything, where these things were literally the flick of a switch before. So you're talking about this cloaking ability, and it's almost chameleon-like.
Yeah, I mean, on the night when we jumped out the car, it had gone. Now, I said, oh, I think it's gone back to the large ship. But I think it was my wife said, well, it might just have cloaked itself again. Although when we first came upon it, the lights were visible. So if it did cloak itself, it would have had to cloak the lights with it. But obviously, they must be able to do that as well. So whilst we're on about the sighting, when we got back and drew the pictures, me, my daughter and my mother-in-law, well, me and my daughter drew the triangle, my mother-in-law described it as having these girders on the surface. My wife, who was driving and being sensible and checking on the road, didn't actually see the craft materialise. She only seen the lights as we approached them. But when I asked her to do a drawing, she drew 3 lights in a perfect triangle, in perfect equilateral triangle, and that's what she said she'd seen. Now, there's no way we would have seen just 3 red lights that as we approached it, because there were other lights mixed in with it, and a central white light as well, I believe. There was some white light, so I assumed it was a central white light. And if we look at the large triangle, the trajectory it was flying away, there is a possibility that it passed over the car. And the little one in the field was a distraction, almost like an ambush. So we're peering at this little one in the field that's all lit up like a Christmas tree, while the big one goes over the top of us. My wife sees underneath of the big one, draws 3 red lights. Then this one disappears, and we jump out, and then we see the large craft disappearing into the distance. But that is only guesswork. I don't really know that. All of this is guesswork.
It's all speculation, but I mean, it's good to throw these ideas about. And you know, the fact that you saw it, and you're talking about it being as big as a house, and then you see it afterwards, and it's absolutely huge. It's a complete mind bend, really, isn't it? But you're not saying, Colin, this is what it was. This is what it. It's great that you're speculating and saying this is what I think.
That's
and let's
right.
face it, there's nobody better placed than you and your daughter, mother-in-law, and wife to actually discuss what you actually saw and experienced.
Yes, throughout the book, I don't say it's this, don't say it's that. I'd say it could possibly be that. We need to keep our minds open. But I do say it's a science that we don't understand yet.
Yeah,
it's not the black magic, heebie-jeebie, strange stuff. It is a science.
What would you have said, Colin, to somebody who's, if you'd never seen this and they're sat listening to you or somebody talking about this, what would you have thought prior to seeing this in 1999?
I would have thought that the person telling me the story believed they'd seen something, but I would need to see it myself. And I know that with everybody else, people who I'm trying to tell the story to, unless you've seen one yourself, like I guess most of the people on this podcast tonight, then you would probably find it difficult to take on board, and you would have to wait until you've seen it yourself. I understand that with everybody. And which is why it's nice to talk to people who've seen this. It's like preaching to the converted, if you like. But everybody but everybody needs to see it for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's what we've got in the chat tonight, and that's what we'll have, not just in this live stream and this podcast, but lots of other podcasts. We're all looking for answers that sort of add something to our own experience, aren't we? And
that's right. Now there is a paranormal side to this as well, which we'll get into in a while. At the moment, I'm just sticking with the nuts and bolts of the
well, somebody described them as girders. Why would you describe them as girders if they looked? When I think of girders, I think of like rough lumps of steel.
Yes, that's what they didn't look rough, but they looked like girders of steel that were interlocking. So to go back to the sighting, when the craft materialized around the lights, these 2 bottom wingtips here, fluffy white clouds appeared on each wingtip, and it would have been on the nose because the nose was tilted down. I could see a little red light off to one side, which by building, I didn't realise until I built the model. The model was amazing, the first model. When you tilt it down, you get the shape of the diamond, but you get this red light on the front of the triangle coming into view. And this little red light, the spurious red light that was off to one side that I could see, had got mist around it. But then I realised from building the model and subsequently playing around with the model that obviously all 3 tips of the triangle had fluffy white cloud around them. Now that is condensation. Strangely enough, a friend of mine sent me a video of a lecture on quantum levitation. So if you bear with me for a moment, if you get a piece of metal and you immerse it into liquid nitrogen and get it down to 0 degrees Kelvin, it becomes a superconductor. And you can get that piece of metal and suspend it in a magnetic field. It will just sit there in midair and not even move.
And does it evaporate or steam or?
And there is mist coming off it.
Yeah.
Once I've seen that and I go back to the model, this is my theory. You see the liquid on the surface, there's liquid nitrogen trapped in a transparent skin. The beams on the surface that are raised in relief off the surface, possibly they're twice as thick as what we can see, and they actually protrude down into the liquid. Therefore, all of these beams on the surface become superconductors, and this craft then has quantum levitation. And because of the superconductivity, this is where the little clouds of the condensation appeared on the 3 wingtips as the craft materialized in front of us. Now, the bottom of the craft we never saw. This is from Belgium. There was a sighting in Belgium from Stockis. The guy drew that pattern underneath and said it was in relief. When I seen that came from Omar Fowler, it seemed quite logical to me that it went with the beams interlocking on the top of my craft. So we never saw the bottom of the craft. It could have been completely smooth as far as we're aware. But because the Belgian sighting was so similar, I decided to bring the two together to make craft.
Yeah. And the Belgium sightings, what year were they? Were they the 1990s, 80s and 90s? Yeah,
I think this one was in the 80s.
Yeah.
This, separate to the flat that they had, this was another sighting. I've put that in the book as well, obviously, because that's part and parcel of building the model.
And so, are you of the firm belief that this object was not man-made?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And this is where it goes a bit strange, really. And I guess I'm one of the few people to talk openly about some of the strange paranormal stuff that occurs. We'll dive straight in, shall we?
Yeah, please do.
When the craft materialised and floated up in the air like this, all of a sudden it was just like somebody got a pair of binoculars and put them in front of my eyes like that. And the
this
craft,
part fascinates me.
Instead of the craft being over here, it was here. Now it was like that. I could see the lines interlocking on the surface, and then the next view I got was the nose. Big round nose. It was that close you couldn't see any of the beams underneath. You could just see the big round nose. And I remember marveling at how it had been manufactured. It looked absolutely superb. It was completely spherical. And then side view. Now on the side view, you can see a white central core. The top and bottom of the craft are joined to a white central, creamy, milky white central core, and it's rolled over. I don't know if you can see that on the model, but the top and bottom are rolled over like a skin on a hovercraft. The next thing I remember is in the car saying, "Oh, stop, I want to get out, I want to get out." Then we go home and we think about it, draw all the pictures, and I'm thinking about the close view, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing. Now, without those close views, I would not have been able to build such an accurate craft. The other thing to point out is, when I got the view of the nose with the top and bottom onto the central core, there's no nuts and bolts, no rivets, no solder, no welding, nothing. I don't know how it had been manufactured. It looked like it had all been super glued together. It looked absolutely incredible. The most amazing piece of engineering work I have ever seen. So, just to quickly turn, you hear a lot of triangles. People talk about refrigerator pipes running up and down them, like the back of a fridge. And I've got a drawing in the book from Michael Schrack of one of those crafts that's covered in pipe work. Whereas this has got liquid, I'm guessing, because we don't know, with the beams inserted inside to super cool them. I think the refrigerator pipes that we're looking at have got the coolant running around them. So the pipes are becoming superconductors themselves. So what we're getting is quantum levitation. And I think that's part of the operation of these craft. Now, we'll get to the Bud Hopkins one, shall we? I think that is the next.
Well, yeah, but I'm still. There's still parts of it. You said you thought that when you saw it at a certain size, as big as a house, and that was a distraction. And
it could well have been, yes, because it was
and I'm in no position to say you're wrong or right. But do you think these things, now you've looked into a little bit more of the UFO phenomena, unexplained phenomena, that kind of thing plays out across the board? I can give an example myself, but just curious to know whether, do you think it was a distraction directed at you personally, or do you think it was a distraction for other people within the car as well?
It was a distraction for all of us, I believe, in the car, for all of us.
Because you're the principal witness, you're the one that's created the model, and you're the one that's running with this. And obviously you've got the full support of your family, but...
well, I don't know. I think the wife thought it was
right.
And there is a reason why I think that occurred, and we'll talk about that, because once I got back home and I made the model, I realised what I'd been looking at by tilting it around. But I started thinking about the close views. Like I said, I could not have built the model without being close to the craft, like somebody put these binoculars in front of my eyes. Now, I do have some other examples of that in the book.
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion I had an out-of-body experience, that somehow I'd left my body, got next to the craft, got the close views in the back of my body again. But what I couldn't understand, if that was the case, like from seeing the nose, why did I not see it roll? Why did I see like the nose and then the side view? Why did I not see it actually turn? That didn't sort of quite make sense, although I didn't know much about out-of-body experience. So I was starting to read books on it to try and get information. I'm trying to do it again, but it never happened.
No.
And okay, now also I'm starting to have a few strange experiences. But before we get into that, I started going to conferences in Leeds with Graham Birdsall used to run those with Russell Callahan. They had some fantastic conferences there. And I remember going to one where Bud Hopkins was there, was one of the speakers. Now I got a chance to speak with Bud, but only briefly, unfortunately. I told him about the triangle, I told him about the close view, and the fact that I thought I'd had an out-of-body experience with the 3 close-up views that I'd seen. And Bob says to me, no, it wasn't out-of-body, they were images placed into your mind by aliens on the craft. And before we got a chance to expand on that, this woman butted in. She got a crystal she'd found in the woods where there'd been a UFO, and she wanted to talk to him. And Bob, being polite, started chatting to her, and that was the end of my 30 seconds with Bob. So I put that to the back of my mind. I thought, images placed in my mind, that doesn't seem right. But then over the years, a lot more information, like researching again on the internet. I've been listening to a lot of David Jacobs. He's interviewed like over 1,000 abductees. Now, one of the things that's coming in out of that all the time is telepathy. The aliens are using telepathy, but they don't always use words, which I thought telepathy would be talking in your mind. Sometimes they use images, because a picture paints 1,000 words. Now, abductees talk about images being placed in the mind. And what happened was, I was working away one day, and then up pops this email from America out of the blue. This guy had seen me on Rich Planet TV doing a presentation. And his opening gambit on the email was, just like you, I had 3 images placed in my mind when I had a close encounter with a triangle. It says 2 of them were outside showing pipe work and some of the lights, and he thinks the 3rd image was possibly inside the craft. And when I read the email, I thought, it was, wow, it was a eureka moment. It all of a sudden made sense. Bud Hopkins was right. There were images placed in my mind by the aliens. And that made me feel really weird. Is that true? Have I had telepathy with an alien? Now, after the UFO event, for the next couple of years, I was having all sorts of strange things happen to me. Not to anybody else, just to me, not to the other occupants of the car. So I couldn't understand why that was happening. But prior to the UFO, I had no paranormal experiences whatsoever. After the UFO, I was starting to have these things.
Do you think that's because you were switched on to the reality that there is something here?
I think it's because they
you've been touched by the magic.
When they got me to do the close viewing, when they were giving me images, then I think they've done something to my mind at that point that was allowing other things to come in. And when I say the images were placed in the mind by the aliens, again, this is a science we don't understand, because when the craft lifted up, because of the liquid surface and the way it floated like a submarine underwater or like an airship, it didn't move up like a normal ship. It looked like it was alive. It looked like it was organic, even though it was clearly manufactured. And the feeling was of love and affection. It was fantastic. It was like meeting God. So is there a case that these advanced craft have some sort of AI, artificial intelligence? Is it the craft putting the images into your mind? Is the craft almost, as far as we're concerned, a living entity on its own? We don't know. But it is a possibility, because you do come across
it's great to sort of play with them thoughts, Colin.
Well, you know, organic. It looked like it was alive. It really did.
Well, you talk. I think your words. I listened to a podcast and you talked about it rearing up like a horse.
Yeah,
is that correct?
That's right. But instead of the horse rearing up the front, it was like the rear, because you saw the top surface of the craft.
Yeah, yeah.
There's very few people in the world who've seen the top of a triangle. Everybody sees them from underneath.
Well, do you know, we've got a guy in the chat, or he was in the chat, and he's seen the top of a triangle in daylight, an absolutely incredible sighting. Nigel, and I heard Les say his name out earlier.
And
And he,
it may be in the book, actually.
well, if it is, you must have got it out of Truth Proof, one of the books.
Possibly, yeah.
And bearing in mind, people, Colin won't have stole any accounts. He's liaised with everybody for everything that he's got within. Is absolutely amazing book. But just to give a breakdown, and then you can tell me if it is in the book. Nigel was working on a caravan park. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're talking about 2019. Early morning, he's with one of his work colleagues, and they sit at the top of the beach, top of the cliff tops, should I say, looking out to the sea. You can see the Hornsey wind turbine in the distance, and the cliffs there are all eroding. So when we say at the top of the cliffs, these are just earth cliffs, clay and soil, and they're just falling into the sea. It's eroding, and it's not far from Hornsey, here on the East Yorkshire coast. And as he sat there with his friend, early morning, bright sunny day, between the cliff and the sea that's quite high tide, but calm, there's a triangle. And it's lower than they are. It's just above the beach, and it's travelling. And he described it, I think, what he said he thought it was as big as one of the large static caravans. And I measured this thing at like 38 foot. Perfect equilateral triangle. Looked like Teflon, was what and it's travelling. Very slow pace. Sees somebody down the cliff, they're amazed what they're seeing. Who wouldn't be? They're amazed of what they're looking at, and he waves to a guy walking a dog, and he sees it, and he's looking at it, and just as it catches attention, and he looks, this thing doesn't fly away. It just switches off. It's gone. It's just vanished. So if these are living sentient things, then obviously we've got this intermind connection. They actually, the intent of the human, they're reacting to that. But yeah. So he's seen the top of a triangle. That weren't to sort of say, oh, you're the only one, Nigel. Sorry, Nigel. Nigel's the guy who saw it, Colin. But
yeah, I believe it may well be the same report I've got in the book. And I believe in that report he said he could see a cockpit, and there was like a purple glow.
So that's a different one.
But he couldn't see any aliens.
No, he couldn't see anything inside.
It's very similar though. It came like lower down. Like in the valley.
Fabulous sighting just along the beach, and the cliffs there are only about 30 to 40 feet, and this is flying just below the cliff top. Incredible sighting. And what's interesting, so people will be able to date this, because I've not got information in front of me, people, and 35 to 38 feet, Lee Roscoe says, and Nigel Logan, yes, so they're there. And where am I going with this? What's interesting, I think it was a few days after the sighting, if anybody can remember when the UK had the most incredible power outages in certain parts of the United Kingdom, and do you know what was blamed? The Hornsey wind turbine that was failing. And it were literally within sight of the Hornsey wind turbine. Now, I am not going to say the triangle was responsible, but I find that uncanny that these things were seen, or this thing was seen. And then we've got the catastrophic power failures within certain areas of the United Kingdom, not East Yorkshire, but the end result was the Hornsey wind turbine was held responsible, or partly responsible, for that failure. So jumping to that, Nigel, I think Nigel, come on, Paul, get a check. Colin, I think before we move on to more of your sighting and experiences, we should see whether Les has got any questions.
Yes, we've got some great questions in tonight, guys, and great show. I've got to say, really, really enjoying it, and totally fascinating your account, Colin. Now, I've got to say at this point, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping here, Paul. You have a website which is on the screen now for everybody, but people who don't know you, who don't know what they can do, they can even just give a little brief description of what they can do when they get there.
Yeah, no problem, Les. Thank you. Obviously, it's truthproof.uk, and we just welcome reports, not just from the United Kingdom. Everything's expanding from around the world, and not just UFO related. Anything, the full spectrum of unexplained phenomena. The reports will come to me and Don Lodge, and we'll kind of vet the reports, and Don will put them onto the website, and we just welcome new reports, and they'll be unique to truthproof.uk. But they're not that unique, people, that if you want to use them yourselves, providing you credit the website and where you found them, then we're happy to let people use the reports. And the books are available on Amazon, or should I say the Kindles are available on Amazon. The paperbacks are available through the website, plus on eBay. And yeah, and over to you then, Colin.
Righto. So just quickly going back to the sighting, one thing I want
No, we want to know where they can get the book first.
Sorry?
We want to know where they can get your book and any information about it.
Amazon. It's available on
Amazon
now. Triangular UFOs of the United Kingdom. The official release date is then a month, 31st of March, which coincides with our sighting exactly 24 years ago. But the book is available now.
Yeah.
It's up there. It's got some lovely images on the front done by a friend of mine in Canada.
Yeah.
Fantastic graphic artist.
And are we looking at the paperback, the Kindle, and an hardback?
Yes, I believe there should be an audio book as well.
Okay. Well, before you carry on, we're going to go to them questions. Les, can I leave you for 2 minutes? I've just got to nip off to ask the question. And right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I'll be literally 2 minutes.
Okay, that's brilliant. So the question is, Colin, this one's from Al, and is asking, Colin, how can you be sure these black triangles were not the F-17s or the B-2 bomber aircraft? I know you've gone into detail about what you've saw and obviously the models that you've been made, right. But how do you know they're not related to these types of aircraft?
Well, the F-17, the stealth fighter, weighs 54,000 pounds, and I think it's got 2 General Electric engines that produce 50,000 pounds of thrust. To get a craft to hover that weighs 52,000 pounds, you need to have 52,000 pounds of thrust coming out of the bottom just to get it to hover. So using conventional engines would make such a noise, and the downdraft would probably blow the car over. And these things are not using any known propulsion that we use at the moment. They're not using any fuel burning. The other thing is, like, you know, when you manufacture aircraft, you manufacture from 0 to I think 75. Any major modifications after that, you do from 75 to 150. You've got to keep records of the craft you're building, and you've got to maintain those craft. You don't change every single one as you go along, as you end up in a right mess trying to maintain and all the drawings and everything that goes with it. So in my book, I've got 130 different sightings, and not one is exactly the same as the other. So to say that there is a manufacturing plant churning out these craft is just crazy, because over the world there must be thousands of different types of triangular shaped craft, because I've got 130 just from my own research here in the UK. There's no way that you could build 130 different craft and keep on top of them. You need maintenance teams to keep them running. So every craft would need a separate maintenance team, and every craft would need different drawings and a different approach. It would just be total chaos. I'm not saying the military are not trying to build these things, because they obviously must be aware that they're around, and I'm sure they're messing with anti-gravity and things along those lines. But because of the extra paranormal experiences that I had after the UFO, that left me in absolute no doubt that this is not one of ours and not from this world. But I don't believe it's extraterrestrial.
Yeah, on a similar vein, thanks for that, Colin. Poppy Studio Paranormal is asking, along the same vein actually, can we hear your thoughts on the alleged TR3B project, please, Colin?
Yeah, I think it was a disinformation project set up by Edgar Fouch. And you find it's worked so well. You go on the internet, there's times I've shown my craft and people, especially Americans, jump up and say TR3B, TR3B all the time. Now, I'm not saying there isn't a TR3B. There may well be one or two, but there's certainly not thousands of them. I don't believe for 1 minute that these triangles are man-made. Absolutely not.
And yeah, thanks for that, Colin. And I might just get this question from Lee Roscoe. And thanks again, Lee, for the super chat tonight. Thanks for all your support. You're great to this channel. And the question is, where do you think they are from? And any reports of them landing?
Right. Right. The first one. Where do I think they're from? Well, a quick story. I was out fishing. I love fishing. I was fishing down on the River Soar at Rothley in Leicestershire, and I heard some footsteps coming across the field towards me. Now, in the past, there's been farmhands down there shooting, so I thought I'll go up onto the riverbank, make myself known. I don't want to get shot at, and just say hello. So I climbed up the riverbank, and the noise is continuing, but there's nobody there. Now, these footsteps are walking towards me from left to right, and they walk right in front of me. I'm scared to death. I'm bricking it. I get a spike out of my rod holder that I use on my umbrella for protection, in case, because I thought it was a big cat. That's the only thing I could think it was, a big cat. With all this stuff, initially, when you see something, you think it's normal human activity. You don't jump straight to it being aliens or paranormal. So I'm thinking this is a big cat coming towards me. They're right in front of me, but none of the grass is moving. Nothing's happening at all. I can't see anything. There's no vibrations. Can't feel anything. All I can hear is this loud footsteps, 4 footsteps, and it walks away from me and disappears. Now, that particular moment in time, when I stood there, I thought, that wasn't a big cat. A big cat wouldn't make noise like that, and there was nothing there. Whatever was there is somewhere else, and I can only hear it but not see it, in one of these space-time contingencies. And I relaxed, and I thought, all of these things that I'm having have come since the UFO. So it's obviously connected. There was a connection between the UFO and these paranormal things that are happening. And that was the day that I decided that that triangle had come from another dimension, not from outer space. You can imagine, like, if you send the Apollo up to the moon and a little alien up there sees Apollo and he comes back down to Earth, you wouldn't expect that little alien to carry on having other experiences of strange natures that he's never had before. Well, that's happening down here with a lot of people, which says to me that this thing is dimensional, not extraterrestrial. And the fact that they probably placed some images, or the craft placed some images in my mind, triggered something that was allowing these things to come through. Now, I assume that these things are always there, but people can't see them. I think when I was in Hull, somebody talked about frequencies and the things that we can see and not see. Like animals can see different things to what we can see. And I think because of the images placed in my mind, that something was triggered that allowed me to see these other things, which I am convinced are dimensional, not extraterrestrial.
Yeah. Just before Les gets to another question, about, because otherwise it'll leave my mind. You're about the images placed in your mind. Do you think the images were projected almost holographic then, so that you could see them externally as well?
No, I think they were just internal, to be honest.
Okay.
Thinking about it, it's a good question. Actually, I've never really thought about that. But
I just wondered. Your mother-in-law, or one of you saw a smaller craft, and then it became a larger craft. And I'm not discrediting anything. I don't mean I believe anything and everything, but I know from background that of yourself, Colin, that you're painting a picture as accurately, and you've not embellished it. And so it's a mind bender, and it's you're talking about images placed in your mind. And years ago, as a small child, and we'll get back to the question in a moment, Les, but as a small child, after the interaction that set me off on this journey that I'm on, sort of speaking to people and looking into all the other things, I woke up in the early hours of the morning, and it was daylight, so it must have been summertime, and this being stood at the bottom of my bed. I mean, I'd have been terrified to have spoken about anything like this years ago, and really now I don't care, because I know what I saw, so why should I pretend and just to pacify other people that can't wrap their heads around it? But then they looked hideous. They looked typical, what you would call aliens, alien grey type beings, 2 tall ones and 3 small ones.
Wow,
and amazing. I was terrified.
Did you frighten you at all?
You what, Colin?
Was you scared? Was you frightened at all?
Terrified, absolutely. And I felt the urge to sit up and look in bed, and I don't know why. And I do know why, because obviously that's the reason I woke up, and I saw him and I turned away, and I kind of buried my face in the cushion, or the pillow. Little boy, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, and I don't know how long, not for long, but it seemed like an eternity. When I turned back, this is what the point I'm getting at, because I had limited life experiences. We didn't have lots of books in house. We were quite a poor family, and so there weren't bookshelves and loads of things to look through. But I knew I'd looked at my mum and dad's wedding album, and what I saw at the bottom of the bed were my nan, my granddad, my mum and dad, and they were just from the wedding album. There were no church in the background. There were no grass. It were those people. They'd placed those images into my head as though they'd flipped through, and that's going to be acceptable. And that's the only way. And so when you were saying about having images placed in your head, Colin, that kind of rang true for me, that they've got that ability. And I realise that there'll be some people listening to this and saying, I don't know, what a load of rubbish. But no, probably you've got to have lived and seen some of these things to actually accept it. And I think a lot of people within our chat, a lot of people who are going to be listening to this are searching for answers themselves. So I hope it resonates with some people, because what you're saying does with me. And I'll jump from that, unless you have any views on it, Colin, and we'll go to Les for another question.
Well, you do hear of it quite a lot, that when people do see entities, that they take on a different appearance to what they're doing. They do appear to what's in your mind. They can read your mind. They're so advanced, these creatures.
Okay, Les.
Yeah,
sorry about that, Colin.
Yeah, thanks for that, Colin. And I've got a question from Shane. Now, this question came in before we went on, before you elaborated on the energy and how you think these craft sit in the sky. Liquid. Was it liquid nitrogen you mentioned?
Yeah, liquid nitrogen, liquid mercury. I'm only guessing, but that's one theory I've come up with.
And the quantum levitation. So Shane, that's what we talked about a little earlier, and because Shane was asking, could the rippling be part of the energy production process, which you've already been through that one, Colin?
That's right.
Thanks for the thanks for the question, Shane. I got one from Richie White. Do you think, and you've already gone into this and give your thoughts on this one, Colin, do you think these craft come from the distant galaxies or other dimensions? You've talked about the dimensions, or realities, or all of the above. And he also says, gives us a compliment. Brilliant show, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Richie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, if we quickly go back to the night of the encounter. Initially, like I said, there was 2 cars. The second vehicle was a Range Rover, and my brother-in-law was in there, and he'd got 2 old French people with him, because he's got a French partner. When we left the pub, they left afterwards. They were struggling to get the old lady into the Range Rover, so we drove off first in the Fiesta. And like I say, when we came up to the Foss Way, exactly half a mile away was these lights, absolutely fantastic. And we looked at them all the time as we drove up to them. Parked in the gateway underneath where the craft had been, and got out the car. And after a while, initially it was quiet, you could hear a pin drop. After a while, traffic started going up and down the road. Aeroplanes are back in the sky again. Not many of them, because it is a very remote area, and just a few cars up and down. We didn't stand there very long. We got back into the car, drove home with the mother-in-law. Now, my brother-in-law lives next door to my mother-in-law. He bought the house next door. When we arrived home, we were surprised to see that the Range Rover was already there. Not only that, but it was all out of the Range Rover and inside the house, which I felt was quite peculiar. The other strange thing was, I didn't want to get out of the car. I just sat in the back there, like feeling mesmerised, I think. I didn't even get out of the car to chat to them. Now, the next day when I went back, and I drove that half a mile from when we turned onto the Foss to where we seen the craft, I couldn't figure out how we'd seen it. It looked like the scenery was different. The trees were in the way. There's no way we could have seen it from that vantage point, unless the craft was higher in the air and came down as we drove towards it. But I don't think that happened. I think the craft was there all the time, and I couldn't figure out how we could have seen it. Now, my wife, who didn't see the craft materialise but saw the lights, a couple of days later, she went to pick a friend of ours up from the airport, and she brought her up the Foss Way to show where we'd seen the lights for her, but the UFO for us. And when she came home, she said to me, I've just took Ruby up the phosphate, and I can't see how we could have seen it from turning the corner because there's loads of stuff in the way. So then I start to think, well, you know, was the scenery different? I have read that a few times over the last 24 years, that people who have had encounters, they've gone back to the same spot the next day, and the road system is different. They can't find exactly where it was. Even a taxi driver could not find the roads that he'd been down the night before, where he'd had an encounter with a triangle. So is there a possibility that if you're close enough to these things when they're coming through, that you get caught up in another dimension? It is possible.
Yeah.
So I believe these are coming from dimensions, but again, like that guy has just said in the question, if, you know, once we learn how to do this, we'll be jumping across to their dimension. Maybe when we're in their dimension, we could travel along somewhere, come back out, and we're like 100 light years away in our own system. You know what I mean? There may be humans out there in our own universe who are advanced enough to understand what's going on, and they're using the dimensions, and they may well be turning up here as well. We may have a mixture, because there are some very human-looking entities, as well as some reptilians and the praying mantis type. So we've got to keep an open mind on all of it, but I'm definitely convinced they're dimensional beings, but they could be using dimensions as well to travel around our own universe.
Colin, you talked about that kind of silence, that I call it the low silence, and the strangeness surrounding the sighting, that as though you were immersed in some kind of, you didn't say a vacuum, but that's how I kind of imagine it. Do you think that you entered another sphere of existence rather than just stumbled on a UFO in a field or over a field?
It's quite possible. I don't know the answer, but I do 100% believe that it was not an accident. I believe they were waiting for us, and because they are
specifically to document this and detail it.
If there's any reason for it happening, the only reason it's come out of it is what's happening today, the models I've built and the book I've written, which is going all over the world. So maybe I'm part of some sort of
long game, some really, yeah.
Now, one of the things I was going to touch on earlier, I'll quickly do that now. If you remember what I said, as we approached the craft, the lights were at an angle to the earth like that. They weren't straight, they were at an angle. Okay. Now, for years, I tried to figure out why that was. Well, we're driving this direction towards the craft. So if you imagine if you're driving towards the craft, and the craft is like straight on, you're not going to be able to see so many of the lights. Now, if the craft tilted like this, and it was also tilted like that, all of a sudden you've got all of the lights in view. And that makes me think they tilted it on purpose. There was intent there. They've done it on purpose because we're coming towards them. So I believe that's why I think it was a bit like an ambush. They've gone out of the way to give us this amazing light show and to drive up so we could just concentrate on that and nothing else. And like I say, there's a possibility that the large mothership passed over us at the same time that we're glued to this little thing in the field next to us. So I do believe it was done on purpose, yeah. And the only reason I can think of it is to get to the point where we are today. And also to point out, I'm not in the army. I'm not a politician. I can speak freely about this. Maybe for 20 years, I just talked about the nuts and bolts, but I'm 65 now. I don't care anymore. 64, I'll soon be 65. I don't care. I'm telling the truth now. I'm telling you exactly what took place that night. Now, whether people go with it or not, I don't really care. I do care, but I know from the book as well that most people, a lot of people, more than 50% of people who have encounters have other paranormal experiences as well. When people were writing to me with their experience, I kept asking, have you had any other experiences? Wow, like the amount of people saying yes all the time. I've got a whole section in the book dedicated to UFOs and the paranormal.
And do you think those other experiences, Colin, opened up, not every time, but a lot of the times after they'd had a major event or something that had sort of opened their mind to the reality of these things?
No, unfortunately, I go against the grain here.
No.
It seems to me that everybody who's had paranormal experiences and UFO experience have the paranormal experiences first. They have ghosts in their life. They see things. They see orbs and stuff. And eventually, it ends up with them seeing a UFO. Now, for me, it's the other way around. I've seen nothing until the UFO, and my experiences came after the UFO. So in a way, I'm a bit different to the other people who've had paranormal experiences.
Before we move on, how much missing time do you think you had?
We had no reference point from the time we left the pub. We know it was 9:50 p.m. when we got back in the car to drive home. And like I say, the Range Rover was already at home. So if we did lose any time, we've got no knowledge of it. It could, you know, we could have lost 15 minutes. We certainly didn't lose an hour, nothing
No.
like that. So we probably didn't lose any time whatsoever.
You talked earlier about having a eureka moment. Have you had any others since where you've remembered a little bit more?
Not recently, no. I think the big one was when I built the first model and tilted the nose down and the little light at the front came into view. It all made sense then, what we'd seen on the night. Prior to that, I could only guess at what the little spurious light was off to one side that got all mist around it.
Yeah.
Now I realise it was one of the little lights at the front underneath, which that was quite amazing when I realised that. It was quite a shock. And I did find, and that was this original model here that I built out of wood and put some papers that I printed on top. I keep it in a suitcase. Now every time I got it out to have a look at it, it would make me shake. I was just excited. It was just incredible. I mean, I can't think of anything else in my life as exciting as that night.
It's incredible. It's literally. And how long do you think it lasted? This that's transformed your life.
We turned the corner. It's half a mile. So if you're driving, she wouldn't have gone very fast. Maybe 30 miles an hour. So we're probably looking at 60 seconds to get 2 minutes, maybe.
Has just set you off on a different path.
Yeah, 2 minutes that changed my life.
Yeah, and
well,
I'd like it's if that's okay, because I think Les has done with questions just for the moment. I'd like to speak to you about a few of the cases within the book. First, I'd like to say though that because I know he's been helpful to you and he's been enormously helpful to me as well. Is John Hanson, veteran UFO researcher, former detective, and what a great all-round great guy John is. But John told me about a report, I think it's from 1901, of a triangle. You know, I mean, all right, it could be misidentification, but we've got a triangle sighting from 1901, going back over 100 years. Are you finding that this is not just resigned to the 1980s and the 1990s? Does it go back decades for you as well, as we get in the research?
It does, yeah. I do come across cases from, I think some of them go back to the 1800s. I think there was one in London.
Really?
I haven't put those in the book though. Really, what I've concentrated on is reports, I guess, from the 1940s onwards, and with people who are sort of alive today, you know, sending reports in. What I've tried to do is steer away from things like Rendlesham Forest. I mean, that's been covered so many times that I've not bothered even touching on that in the book.
So you just, well, I know you're going to tell us about a few views of or sightings that you've collected, but have you any views on Rendlesham? You've spoke.
I don't know. It gets so mixed up, doesn't it? I mean, I met.
Well, there's so many conflicting stories and accounts and of what happened and what didn't happen, and probably not the place to do it. But okay, let's just move on to some of your reports then.
Okay, then I'll just quickly read you a couple from the book. There's 3 of particular interest that I wanted to touch on.
And questions, please, in capitals for Colin. If we've got any more, let's just keep them firing away.
Yeah. Okay, this is a guy called Charles B. December 2011. So I'll read what he says. He was discussing UFOs with his daughter, and they'd seen a light. So we decided to look for the light and try and get closer. We saw it one night moving over the Modern area of the town. My ex-partner tried to say it was Venus, but Venus was also clearly visible, and the object was also clearly visible. My ex's daughter, who was 7 at the time, became hysterical and said it was aliens. We pursued the object, which was very bright, but as we followed slowly into the car into North Yorkshire, it seemed to be getting lower. We both reasoned it was maybe a helicopter, but there were no strobes and no noise. Somewhere between Cleesby and Manfield, we lost sight of it as it got too low. We looked for the object, but decided to give up and turn back home. As we drove back along the A67, I said, let's look down by the river at Low Coniscliffe. With hindsight, I think they told me it was there. After driving down the track to the river, it was probably about 300 feet above ground level. It was huge, at least 1,000 feet across. The lights at the apices were dim yellow-orange, and there was a dimmer orange light in the body towards the back. I got out of the car and stood staring at the triangle. There was total silence. I could no longer even hear the traffic from the nearby A1M motorway. The body was black, and it blocked out the stars, but I could see stars around it, and also a nearby farmhouse on the hill south of the river. It also seemed to block out the breeze. I don't know whether I got closer to it or it to me, but it seemed I seemed right underneath it. I could see black channels etched into the underside of it, which made me think they were a docking mechanism. I can't explain how. I've never told anyone until now, but it seemed to be just a few feet above me. It seemed to be made of slate or graphite material, very dark grey and a smooth matte texture. I could feel the presence in my whole body, and a dental implant was vibrating in my mouth. I could see the channels covered the inside of the craft. They were probably 6 feet across and of a similar depth. I raised my hand and touched part of the craft's body between the channels. I was terrified and even thought it could harm me, but I did it anyway. I pushed my fingers over it and then put my entire palm on it. It felt like a hard kitchen worktop with a matte finish, but it was not cold. The next thing I remember is my daughter shouting me to come back to the car. She hadn't wanted to get out. Now that is a pretty close encounter.
That's incredible. And you know, you talked about seeing things close up as though you'd got powerful binoculars as you're looking at this in all its sort of vivid detail. And this witness is talking about touching it, and then but she also says it's something like 1,000 feet. So if she's telling the truth, and we've no reason to say she's not, so if she's telling the truth, this thing's so precise in its movements.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Absolutely incredible. 1,000 foot, and it comes down that close. You can put your hand up and touch it. That amazing. This guy, I've used a pseudonym because he's actually a close protection officer. I don't know if he does royalty or politicians or what, but he's not one for making up stories. You know, this is a true story that happened to him.
And to be so close to something like that and not be damaged. And I don't mean damaged by whatever it is that this thing's emitting, but just by we'll call it a propulsion system. We obviously don't understand the mechanics of what drives these things, but no effect, nothing. And once again, you've got your witness talking about this descent into the lower silence, this disjointed reality that you talked about, that lots and lots, it goes hand in hand with everything we're talking about, not just the triangles.
Is it this dimensional thing again, you know, this silence that people are we getting sucked into some sort of dimension? We just don't know. I mean, we could theorize that it's time travelers, you know, coming from the future, and when you're with them, time changes, you know, some sort of time dilation. I have a report of a guy whose motorbike stopped in the local town in Hinckley. It stopped outside Transco, which is the gas central hub for the United Kingdom. His bike just packed up, so he's sitting outside Transco, and this triangle came over. He said it was 1.5 times the size of the football pitch, just clearing the top of the building. And he watched it go over, and it went over the town of Hinckley. There was 1 or 2 other people who reported it. His bike started up again. He went home, and he'd lost 1.5 hours and on a short journey from Nuneaton to Hinckley. Woke his parents up. They told him the time was correct, and he told them the story. He kept it quiet for years and years until I came out with my story. Then he told me about that, but he'd lost 1.5 hours of time. Yeah.
Do you know, it might be a detail that I've missed or that you picked up on. I don't know, but you said his bike started up again. What, by itself?
No, he started bike again, but initially the bike packed up, it stopped, the engine stopped running. Yeah. And he just sat astride it as the triangle came over. Once the triangle had gone over, he kicked it or electric start, not sure what it would be.
Here's one that I'd forgot about, Colin, and this is 2009. It's prior to Wilsthorpe incident, but it's at Fraysthorpe, which is about a mile away, literally. And this is a police officer, and he's travelling from a little seaside resort called Barmston towards Bridlington, and Fraysthorpe's in between. And as he's travelling down the road, the car approaching in the night, its lights suddenly die and it stops. He pulls over, the police officer gets out to see what's the problem, because there's no pull-ins on this road. Anybody that knows the Fraysthorpe road, there's no pull-ins. and there's a hedge at the back of it. Some ponies are usually in the field, and I don't know, it's about 3-acre field. I can picture it now. And he claims that a triangle lifted from above the hedge, so it can't have been that deep, this triangle. The edges there are about 10 or 12 feet. Lifted from the hedge and flew out to sea. And then this guy said that the lights lit up on his car again. It were almost as though it was sucking power out of his battery. I don't know. And his car started and he were able to drive. I know that lots of people talk about mechanical failures with cars and or any type of engine, but propulsion system. But why doesn't it affect aircraft? Do you know why?
Yeah. And maybe they stop them on purpose because they want them to.
Yeah, good point. I mean, because there's a lot of systems within the aircraft. I know we're jumping away from your reports, but we'll go back to them in a moment. But there's a lot of systems within modern aircraft that are all computerized, and unless we're being kept in the dark about the potential for these things to affect aircraft computerized systems or whatever it is. I mean, have you got any reports of anything like that?
No, that's a good point, actually. No, you don't hear of them interfering with aircraft. You only seem to hear them interfering with cars and bikes.
Yeah. You know, and the older aircraft, you know, the sort of nuts and bolts, sort of the ones prior, like the MiGs and things that weren't as sort of sophisticated, and the Lightnings. You know, there's a case over the North Sea, allegedly pursuing a UFO over the North Sea, September 8th, 1970, XS894, that unfortunately crashed into the North Sea. I'm not saying it's UFO related, but there's a lot of information that suggests it possibly could have been. Tony Dodd did a lot of work on that. So did the UFO, if this is what was happening, interfere with the mechanics of that aircraft and cause it to crash? I don't know.
Yeah, I believe there's been 1 or 2 aircraft that have crashed along the way, military aircraft. I think recently didn't some pilots say that they were chasing Tic Tacs and the instruments were behaving a bit peculiar.
Really? And it altered things within the aircraft.
Yeah.
Just interestingly, as a side note, you know, I think it was June the 15th, 1997. RF Tornadoes ZE723, and I might have got number wrong, crashed about 15 miles off, or went off radar about 15 miles off Bempton and Flamborough Head. And the UFO reporters of the day, or the UFO investigators of the day, I weren't involved in this, were chasing this story as though it was UFO related, because there'd been a lot of activity. And this was June the 15th, 1997. There'd also been reports that year, and you'll have picked up on this, even if it's not in your book, of the battleship-sized UFO that were travelling along the north, across the North Sea. You maybe heard of that one.
Yeah.
And I know John Hanson's got information about it, but where am I going with it? June the 15th, 2020, in the same area. I'm not saying it's UFO related. I've nothing to connect it to it, but it's interesting that with the dates coincide. June the 15th, American Sea Eagle crashes into the sea and is lost off Bempton and Flamborough. Same dates. Just a little bit of, I don't know, it could be coincidence. I've actually got quite a lot of information relating to June and around June the 15th from this area. But let's jump to some of your sightings from
you just quickly reminded me what I want to just quickly touch on, that a local guy lives in a village called Sharnford, Mal Orton his name is. Now, we had our sighting on the 31st of March 1999. He had his sighting was the 19th of March 1999. So just 2 weeks between the two of us. And as the crow flies, I think it's about 4 miles from where we've seen our triangle to where he's seen his. Now, he was driving out of Sharnford up towards Bumblebee Lane. And when he got to Bumblebee Lane, which is in the middle of nowhere, he said there was a triangle hovering in a field. He said it was the size of a football pitch. He said it was absolutely enormous. So he stopped his car and got out, and he walked up to it, and he said it hung in the air like a picture hanging on a wall. It didn't move at all, not even a thousandth of an inch. Now, when you look at the quantum levitation video that I watched, when they get a piece of metal to sit in the air, it doesn't move. It doesn't move at all, not even a thousandth of an inch. And this craft was doing exactly the same thing. But the incredible thing was it was 2 weeks from our sighting, and only 4 or 5 miles as a crow flies between the two sightings. He was quite close to the A5 and
Did he describe a similar thing to what you saw as well?
Yes, exactly the same with girders as well, but the only difference was because he could obviously see underneath it. It must have been slightly like hedge height. He said the lights were different, reversed to ours. Ours had a white in the middle and red in the corners. He had red in the middle and white in the corners.
Okay.
But that is something I could talk about again in a little while, because I've gone through all the sightings and made lists of commonalities between the lights and the colours and the shapes and the size and the noise. And so there's a lot of information that can be extracted from the book.
Just before we move from that, though, Colin, 4 miles from your sighting, why have you? I'm not expecting you to have an answer to this, but why there? What have you got any thoughts on why that location? Because you did touch on earlier that this thing reared up like a horse, and I just played on the idea because I'd just done a little bit of digging around of what you were about and what you'd been talking about on another podcast. And you talked, and your daughter said there's a story of a headless horseman.
That's
we
right,
know that's not what you're looking at, but obviously we've got stories of unexplained phenomena in that area. That's what I'm saying. That's where I'm going. So
something going on there.
Yeah,
and if there's any reason why that occurred, and I doubt it, because I don't really go with this theory, but ley lines. A lot of people think ley lines are attractive to UFOs. Well, the Watling Street and the Foss are both built on ley lines. They go in different directions, but they cross over each other at a place called High Cross, which was just a few miles from where we had our sighting. And again, same with Mel, who had his sighting of the huge triangle. Both were close to two ley lines intersecting. But personally, I don't think the ley lines have got anything to do with it. I don't know.
Well, I've no views either way with that one. But I know there's a lot of people that do subscribe to the ley line having some kind of connection to the UFOs and the unexplained.
The amazing thing about Mal is that his granddad also had an experience, but in the village itself of Sharnford. His granddad's garden backed onto open fields, and he said one night there was some lights and he thought it was a farmer in his tractor. So he went out into the garden and there's this triangle at the field at the bottom of his garden, and he said all these golden bits of paper like were coming out of the craft, and then the craft just disappeared. I think it cloaked itself and went. So his granddad, and also the local vicar seeing it as well. So there was 2 witnesses to that, and one of them was Mel's granddad. They seem to run in families, these things.
And they seem to what? Sorry.
Run in families. Families quite often. Your parents see something, your grandparents have seen something. It seems to be like maybe a bloodline in there. So, maybe it is.
And the golden flecks of paper, or I'm picturing confetti type substance. Were they anything found, or did they not say? Were there anything left behind?
I don't think they were found, but it didn't say. Yeah.
Do you know in North Yorkshire, we've got all these kind of remote places and forests, and there's a place called Falling Foss. There's a waterfall there, and a guy told me, I were out sort of walking the area one day, and we got into conversation, and I always try, I don't try and steer everything around to the unexplained, but I asked him if they've seen unusual, and he were telling me about seeing a UFO and chasing it, and it's dripping. It's going slowly through the forest, and it's dripping, almost like dripping. What would you like? Almost like mercury. And
I've heard this before, actually. Yeah.
And it's dripping, but there's nothing there to the substance. With the smacks on the head, we must do that before we end this tonight. But it'll make sense, people, in a moment. And I know you did talk about it before, but
normal stuff. So, let's read another section from the book.
Please do.
I find this one, when the lady phoned me up, she was ever so excited and told me about this. Her name was Lindsay Turner. Again, we've used a pseudonym on this one. 1983 in Nottingham. She says, my friend was 3 years older than me and we were unemployed at the time. We decided to go and visit Dad's property, a 10 to 15 minutes walk away, and we arrived at 8 till 9 p.m. at night. The house had a football pitch just beyond the back garden with wild space surrounding it. The weather had been dry all day. When we came to leave late that night, we glanced over to the football pitch via an entrance. We both spotted the mist and the triangular pyramid-shaped craft. So we decided we'd go and investigate. The pyramid object was the size of a council house and not quite on the ground, but hovering just above the ground, about a foot or two in height. The pyramid looked to be made of glass and was transparent. When she says a foot or two in height, she means off the ground, not the...
Yeah.
The pyramid looked to be made of glass and was transparent, and I could see swirls of coloured gas inside, yellow, blue, green, in fact like a rainbow. As they approached the pyramid, it backed away from them. But when they backed away, the pyramid returned to its original position. The craft then became solid. You ready for this? In fact, Lindsay described it as metallic with Egyptian hieroglyphs on all the sides. One of these hieroglyphs was a man with a bird's head carrying a long spear. Lindsay and her friend became nervous and decided to go home, where they believed they lost between half to 3/4 of an hour in time. Lindsay's friend plucked up courage and went back to the football pitch, but the pyramid, triangle-shaped pyramid, and the mist had now gone. I asked Lindsay if she had any other experience, and she replied, "I've seen an odd few lights throughout my life, and as a very young child, had an experience playing with toys with the ghostly lady that came into the room." And I spoke to this lady twice, and to realise that the triangle that she's in, the pyramid shape, had got these Egyptian hieroglyphs on the side, just blew me away. And these people are not making it up. I mean, why would they? You know, I've had to use a different name. She doesn't want fame. She doesn't want fortune. She's just telling me the story. So there's a definite connection now between Egyptians and UFOs. I just found that mind-blowing.
Do you know, and some of the things people say, and myself included, you're saying things that almost discredit what you're trying to convey, but you're giving it out as your truth. And this lady with the, what did she say? An Egyptian with a staff,
with a spear, yeah, the bird's head.
Spear, sorry, yeah. You know, and it does sound it also smacks kind of thing of her truth. But if we jump back to what you were saying earlier about the images placed in your mind, could that be being played? We know we're only playing with words here, and we don't know. Possibly she did see it, but could they be playing with us and placing these images in our minds, and it just throws it all into confusion? You know,
possibly, yeah, possibly. I don't know what the game plan is. I don't think they are doing things for the fun of it. I mean, I've never heard of anybody having fun with aliens. They don't seem to have a sense of humour.
Well, that's a good question. Before we move on to another one of your accounts, are they good or bad, these things, in your opinion?
My experience has been good, but not everybody's experience is good. One thing that's concerned me, and I've touched on this before, is that the government must know what's going on. The military must know. If we know as civilians, they must know what's going on. But they're not telling. They're keeping it quiet and deny it. They've denied it, you know, for the last 60, 70 years since Roswell.
So
also,
I know
the aliens themselves, they are going to great lengths to keep secret, apart from certain people they pick on, which is odd. But overall, the majority of people in the world are not don't get to see. It's all kept very quiet. Now, if the aliens are keeping quiet what they're doing, and the government's keeping quiet, that doesn't bode well, does it? I mean, whatever they're getting up to, they don't want us to know. It doesn't sound.
Oh, without a doubt. But so obviously we're going to go to a few more of your accounts. But I'm interested. Why now then? Does there seem to be an uptake in telling Joe Public and showing Joe Public potential UFOs, and we've got major powers of the world talking openly about the potential that these things are here? Why are we getting that now when we've gone back decades, Colin, of denial and suppression, and we're all that stupid, myself included, to have just gone along with this like sheep, and we've just seemed to have jumped on board the back of this train that now they're telling us this information, and we're just kind of accepting it as though it's the norm. We're not questioning why we've been lied to for the last 5 decades.
I think if I'd have came out with the strange paranormal stuff 24 years ago when I had the experience, people may not have believed me quite so much, which is why I stuck to the nuts and bolts for a long time. Now,
you feel like you're being disingenuous to yourself then?
Yes, I guess so. But if we take this back 100 years or 200 years, you'd be burnt at the stake, you know, as a witch.
Yeah.
You would not be coming out with this information. So maybe it's a case that this information's always been there, but people have been too afraid to talk about it. But now, as time's gone on, more and more people are talking about it. I know we move in them circles anyway. To us, it seems like everybody we know has had an experience. But I just think it's easier to talk about it now, and it's more acceptable, especially it's becoming a little bit more mainstream. But one thing I'd like to touch on with that previous experience that I was talking about, I've always found in my life, telling the truth makes you strong. If you start telling lies, you need to have a good memory. You get it wrong, and you'll end up getting into a mess. If you tell the truth all the time, it gives you a certain sort of power. I tell the truth now. If people want to knock it, fine. I can cope with that. But I know what I saw. I know what's happened to me. And if you look at all of my podcasts, look at everything I talk about, it's always the same. It doesn't change. You know, I'm not embellishing it whatsoever. So all of these people, I believe in the book of telling the truth. I've got none of them I don't believe as I've made this up. So let's give you another example. This is a guy called Rob Fowler. He now lives in New Zealand, but he did live in the UK for quite some time. This is where he had his experience. He'd been having a band practice. They'd seen a light in the sky, and they decided to follow it. It's quite an in-depth report, but I'll cut to the chase.
Yeah, just roll with it. It's all good.
So we stopped and got out on the bridge to study the sky, looking for the object. Parked up in the lay-by was a Volkswagen camper van to sort with a concertina roof. There was a light on inside, and I wanted to go and see if they'd seen the object. Dave did not want to. I walked down a very slight incline towards the cul-de-sac and turned to see Dave, who was saying, "No, don't," again and again, pleading me not to go closer. "Don't do it, Rob." I turned and the camper van was not there. But instead, there was a gunmetal coloured, wedge-shaped craft, very much like the side view of an F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter. It is the best description. It was angular, sharp, pointy, defined. It was more of a wedge, but the angles and surfaces reminded me. They were not smooth, they were flat. The image lasted 1 second, and I was instantly on the other side of it, facing what appeared to be the nose. Now, initially, he got in touch with me because I'd seen these close views. Now, he's having the same experience. He's standing there, but then all of a sudden, he's closer to it. So me and this guy are sharing some of these weird experiences. So the image lasted 1 second, and I was instantly on the other side of it, facing what appeared to be the nose. It was remarkably close, maybe a foot away, and it appeared to be alive, but artificial, same as I was saying earlier. The nose, well rounded and almost like a glove puppet shape, and I had the sense it was sniffing me. Either side of it, the visible sloping away from me, parts either side of the nose, had the appearance of being like the cowcatcher on an old US steam train. That again could be like the girders seen on the surface of my craft. But they had a pattern to them. It was like a maze, but with segments in it, like expensive chocolate, like a cattle branding iron might appear, or embossed writing paper. I recall a red element to the nose, but at this point I am unaware of any other surrounds at all. I am being sniffed by the nose of a hovering craft. The nose is gone. Again, these are the strange views. And I'm in front of a panel with that embossed appearance, on the side of something that is now looking like the base of a pyramid. As I reach out my hand, I hear Dave saying, "Rob, no." My hand goes into the pattern, and now has a liquid texture, like immersing your hand into a bowl of paint. There was an orange lightning, and there's a fizz boom, and like turning off an old TV back on the bridge with Dave, and I say, "Well, that was very nice." He looked up, and there are 3 white stars flying away from us north in a triangular formation. So that guy got that close and was brave enough to actually immerse his hand into the liquid surface of the craft, and then the craft went boom and gone.
And once again, Colin, parallels to your sighting, you know, and it defies explanation how something so big and obviously so powerful. I mean, we don't know what mechanics or what propels these things, can get so close to somebody. It's just amazing. And
yeah, the one earlier where the 1,000-foot craft came down, on top of a guy where he could just stretch up and touch it. I mean, the accuracy of that craft to know what it was doing.
Yeah,
It's incredible. Yeah, fantastic.
it really is. And do you know, 1966, just where I know people won't know Bridlington as we talk on this podcast. Some people will be from location, but where Bridlington Hospital is now, you'll have to Google it, people. That were pretty much sort of waste ground and trees. And there's a guy that I talk to quite often, and he told me, we go over this story time and time again. He works on Bridlington Harbour. I'll not say his name. And they were up to no good in 1966. They were cutting trees down and laying them under edges, ready to sort of spirit away and cut into logs. Just young lads. They're not sort of robbing a bank or anything, but that's what they were doing. And he were with his younger brother. And you talked about this wedge-shaped craft. And he says, we're up there where the hospital is now, people. There's nothing there. It's all built up. He said, there's a flash in the sky, and we looked up. He said, and it's hung in the sky, and it's wedge-shaped. And we'll say like a piece of cheesecake on its side.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, and it's an amazing silver, like almost polished, sort of flexing kind of chrome colour. And it's there in the air, just hung. He says, and there's a blue haze all the way around it, like a blue. Imagine like a Bunsen burner or something. Because I've spoke to Rob many times. He's allowed me to record him, you know, because I wanted to. I've written about the story. And what's puzzled what's puzzled Rob all these years. This is 1966, in his 70s now. He said there was a noise. He said it made a clunking sound. He says, now, I don't mean every day, but anybody who's had these experiences, and yourself included, there's not many times during the day that this ain't going through your head and you're trying to decipher things. He said, and every day since, he said, I've never heard this sound before or since. And I'd be interested if anybody's talked about these sounds with you. He said, and it were like the most huge mechanical cog. He said, and this thing just made this sound and then moved forward in one big movement and stopped, and then just shot off at incredible speed. And then it shot off out to sea. There is another witness out there. I've not managed to speak to him. He's trying to put me in contact with him. But 1966, this wedge-shaped object, you know. But have you heard anybody speak about sound with these things?
Yes. Like I say, I've gone through the book and through all the sightings, and I made a list of some of the commonalities between them. So if we're talking about noise, I mean, there was no noise from ours whatsoever, but then again, the engine was running on the Fiesta that we was in, so
right.
It could have been making a noise, but we didn't hear it above the sound of the engine. But other people have described it as like a dull hum sound, like a low humming, like a transformer. Other people say buzzing, droning, sucking like a vacuum cleaner. These are the noises that have been reported by people who are close to them. I'll quickly run through some of these because I think they're interesting.
Yeah,
I've always thought that triangles, generally speaking, are grey and black in colour with red and white lights underneath, either white in the middle and red in the corners, or reverse, red in the middle, white in the corners. But going through the book and looking at the colours of the triangles that people have spotted, we've obviously got the grey and the black, but we've also got orange and silver, gold, white, blue, dark brown and green. Now the lights that have been reported on the side of these triangles vary from red and white, but also green, blue, yellow, orange, bronze, purple and a pinkish orange, and often a white beam can be seen protruding down from the centre of the craft. That's been reported quite a lot. We've gone through the noises like a transformer. The sizes, they all vary from quite small triangles to football pitch sizes. None of them ever seem to be exactly the same size. Descriptions are interesting. You know, the fridge pipes in girders, they crop up quite a lot in triangle sightings.
Have we got any years, Colin? Have you noticed decades where lights change or anything? Or is this just
I haven't tied it in with years. No, just looked at all the different aspects of the sightings rather than the years. Actually, no. I've tried to put a lot of the book into chronological order.
Yeah.
Wherever I could. Descriptions, like I say, the fridge, pipes, girders. People have felt pressure when the craft has been over on more than one occasion. The cloaking is quite popular. That's seen quite a lot. Shimmering, like tin foil, you know, rippling, black tar, And missing time obviously comes into a few of those. A few people have said it looks alive but artificial. And the movement, now in the early days, when I'd seen my triangle, I started researching on the internet. When people started talking about their experience with the triangle and saying that it floated, I knew straight away they were telling the truth, because you have to see this craft to see how it moves. They don't move like a normal craft. One guy described it in America. He said, when you're making a bed with a partner and you've got 4 corners of a sheet and you put the sheet on the bed and it's trapped with air and it slowly sinks down onto the bed, that is the sort of effect of the way that these craft move. So it's, they describe it as fluid, gliding, floating, looks like it's underwater. Sometimes it's seen flying blunt end first as well. So the shape of the craft is not necessarily done for aerodynamics, it's probably done for stability. And quite often, balls of light turn into triangles. They just morph from a ball of light into an actual triangle. That is seen quite a lot as well.
That's fascinating, isn't it? You know, a report in once again Truth Proof 3, I think, and military contractor, and he saw spheres of gold light over the sea, and he put powerful binoculars onto them, and he said he could see not pyramids inside them.
Right,
you know, and inside them. I mean, we've seen these spheres of light over at sea off Bempton and Speeton. I've never seen anything inside them. But sorry to detract. You'll just carry on with the descriptions if you want.
No, that's basically the majority of the information I've extrapolated.
Just before we go to questions, because I think Les will have a few questions, just want to touch on one thing. And I know that you're not looking into the cryptid side of unexplained phenomena, but there's an interesting aspect that you touched on there when you're talking about these things shimmering and also almost being in and out of our reality. And we get talk of, within the cryptid field, of these creatures almost being shimmering and translucent, and the floating. I'm not trying to say that they're on these objects, by the way. There's no way that I believe that or want to subscribe to that, but I've got lots of reports from the cryptid witnesses of these things not running, not walking, but arriving, just floating. So it's just parallels within the phenomena that seem to kind of run through a similar thread. Do you know what I'm saying there, Colin? I do,
yes. I did hear somebody talking once, and that caught my attention when they were talking about the Loch Ness Monster. Because they were saying, with dimensions, once you take dimensions on board, parallel universes, when a triangle wants to disappear from here, it can just go back to where it's come from. And, you're not going to find any evidence of it. Could just be the same that some creatures have the ability to come across some dimensions. So if you will have a good escape mechanism as an animal, and you're being chased and hunted, could you not just disappear to another dimension?
Yeah, just
like Loch Ness,
slip in and out of existence.
Submarines around looking for him, going back to his other dimension. I mean, that is a possibility. So maybe Bigfoot is, a dimensional creature. I don't know.
I think there's a strong possibility. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that we've got about 10 minutes left, Colin, so we'll go to Les and see if he's got any questions. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, fine, yeah.
That'd be brilliant.
Yes, thanks, guys. And some of these I know will be a little bit quick fire, probably, Colin. So, but we'll see how far we get, because I do have a few here. Shane is asking, and I know you've touched on this when you kind of poo-pooed ley lines, but Shane is asking, do they use the magnetic field of the planet?
Yes, I believe so. This is where the quantum levitation comes in. I'm sure this is a good point, actually, because if you're using anti-gravity and quantum levitation, you need gravity to be able to use anti-gravity. So if you're in outer space, as far as I'm aware, there is no gravity. You need to be on the planet. So if these craft are coming from 100 light years away, 1,000 light years away, they're not going to be possibly anti-gravity. Is it more likely? Does it point to the fact that these are dimensional rather than extraterrestrial? That could be a possibility.
And thanks, Shane. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Shane, for that one. And Steve Trees is asking about the lights on the craft. Did the lights on the craft conform to regulations, You know, as in the
Absolutely
Avionics.
no way. I mean, there weren't even lights, really. We look at the 4 red lights on the back of the craft that were tilted at an angle. I stared at one of those lights intensely. Now I could see a crisscross effect on the light. Now I could see that was not etched into the manufacture of the light itself, but it was like a side effect of the light coming out of the hole. So it's what we refer to, like, we did it at school, Newton's law of ring interference. And I've seen this with a laser pen. If you shine a laser pen and look into it, you can see some crisscross lines appearing on it. Now, the back of those lights on the back of the craft, they were given that impression of being Newton's law of ring interference. It wasn't etched into the glass. It was the most weirdest sort of lights you've seen. There certainly weren't navigation lights, and most craft would have green and red and white, but these were just white and red. And the lights didn't, you're thinking about it, the lights didn't light up the ground or anything. And I don't think they're lights to be seen by either. That's not, I think the lights really are just a byproduct of the power source. They certainly don't conform to any regulations of aviation lighting.
That's interesting what you said there. Sorry, Les, I'll keep it brief because we've literally got 10 minutes left. Because I'm not really, it's a question, it's something I always know when we're looking at these lights over the sea, and when we're looking at, we've seen them at close quarters on the cliff tops, they don't light a massive area of ground around them. So you've just answered my question there. These red lights didn't illuminate the area around them then?
No, and even after staring at them, and even though they were so bright, once the craft disappeared, there was no degradation to the eyesight. You know, there was no spots in front of your eyes or anything along those lines. It was just perfect. I did say that at a conference many years ago, and an optician was there, and he said to me, I believe what you're saying now. He says, because you use rods and cones in your eyes. So on submarines, they have red lights because you're using, I don't know, say the rods of your eyes. And when you come out of a submarine into normal daylight, you can see straight away. But if they were using white light in the submarine, when you come up top, it takes a while for your eyes to adjust.
To adjust, yeah.
Because I told him about the red lights, how bright they were, and how I stared at them without any degradation, he believed me. He said I was telling the truth.
Excellent. Come on, Les, let's have another one, please.
Yeah, I've got a question from Shane, and it sounds like a great question to me. Do you think in space the magnetic field will come from particles thrown from the stars?
That's a tough one. I've got absolutely no idea on that. No idea.
No,
they have certainly got very advanced technology.
I take it it was a sarcastic question, saying we couldn't hear Les because nobody else is saying it in chat. Just throwing it out there because I think the microphones and everything's working tonight. Les, I'm right in that, Anna.
Should be, yeah.
Yeah.
Should be, yeah. Let's have a look. It might be a little bit low there, actually. Okay, so... Right then, I know you touched on possible a little bit of time going astray in your sighting, and Ralph Winter is asking, did Colin experience missing time? I know you've already talked about this. Go on.
Yeah. No, as far as we were aware, no, there was no missing time. Like I say, we did have a reference point from when we left the pub. It's a shame I didn't think about that back in 1999. I could have gone back to the pub and seen what time we paid the bill, and then worked out what time we got home and see if there was anything in between. But as far as we were aware, there was no missing time. There could have been a few minutes without us realising, but it was very strange that my brother-in-law was not only home before us, but they were out of the Range Rover with the old French lady inside the house. So
and when you arrived back,
surrounded in weirdness.
When you arrived back, were they confused that you weren't before them?
I don't know, because like I said, I didn't want to get out of the car. I just sat in the back, feeling really comfortable and melancholy, and just reflecting on what had happened. It is a what's the word, when it just changes everything you think about that particular moment in time. Something point I can't bring it to mind now what it is, but paradigm shift. The paradigm shift, the way you're thinking. Everything I've learned, all of my career, everything I've ever done, went out the window in a split second. It was just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing.
Okay, Les, another
Colin,
question, because we've got 4 minutes.
The Revenant is asking, why do you think the craft have lights like our aircraft? Are they mimicking them? Just seems odd to be lit up if you are trying to remain hidden, or do they want to be seen? I think you touched on this as well, Colin, earlier.
Yeah, I think it's a byproduct of the light, so sometimes they can't help but be seen. But generally speaking, I think, especially on close encounters, they're doing it on purpose and they're showing you the lights on purpose. Which is why I say I believe the craft was tilted at an angle when we drove towards it so that we could see more of the lights. They were certainly making us aware of it. And in the deep, dark countryside where there's no street lights, I mean, it just made it even brighter. So I think in our case, definitely they were doing it on purpose.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got Patricia Adams Wright is asking, and it'll have to be a quick fire on this one. During your research, Colin, which do you class as the most outstanding report?
Good question, Pat.
Oh, yeah, good question. Probably the one where he put his hand inside the liquid. Because I've heard there's a couple of accounts of people touching the craft, but not actually immersing the hand inside the liquid. For me, also about that particular sighting, with Rob Fowler from New Zealand, that he was getting these images, like he said he was looking at the craft and the next thing he knows he's standing next to it, which is very much the same that happened to me. The only difference being he somehow managed to put his hand inside the liquid. And that is so strange, isn't it? Because if they're putting images into your mind, how can you then actually touch it as well? It's almost like
how can you believe? And you're thinking they're putting images into your mind, and I'm not saying they're not doing. But how can you believe what you're actually seeing? How do we know that we're not all being played and manipulated, myself included? It's
well,
a strange one.
I guess there was 4 of us that night. 4 of us saw the lights and 3 of us saw the craft. So the 3 of us all seen the same triangle.
Yeah.
With the girders, as my mother-in-law called them. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law's passed away now. When we cleaned out the bedroom during COVID, after she'd gone, we found all these papers on paranormal stuff that she's been collecting over her lifetime. We never realised that. So obviously my mother-in-law was into all of this before we had the UFO experience. So she like me wanted to get on board.
It's one of those if onlys, isn't it? You just don't know these things till it's too late. But that's the way of it.
Sorry guys. Yeah, and Colin, Roddy's asked a question. It kind of leads on to what we've just been saying, and you've answered it partly. Has any of your family ever experienced anything paranormal?
My daughter is, my mother-in-law has obviously seen things along the way. She used to live on a pub called the Lime Kilns on the A5, and she had a few ghostly experiences down there over the years. My daughter, when she was at primary school, came out of the class, she said there was a little boy sitting on the step, dressed like a Victorian, and then when she turned around, it dawned. So she's seen a ghost, and she's seen some mist crossing the road as well. So my daughter seems to be a little bit more in tune with what's going on, but it's nothing major for her.
I'm just going to squeeze this one in, Paul.
Yeah,
Tino is asking, Colin, do you think some of the triangular craft are connected to certain things that happen to animals? I can't say the word because YouTube might pick up on and delete the stream.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Yeah, it happens so much. It's happened locally as well in Loughborough, not too far away from here, where the horse had some problems. Yes, I actually find it quite a fascinating subject. I do, when I'm looking at triangles and UFOs, if anything along those lines pops up, I do tend to have a look at that.
Link them, yeah.
And try and figure out what's going on there. But I firmly believe, that some beings are messing around with some of our animals down here. Horses, deers, cattle. You hear quite a lot, actually.
Just one thing before I turn it over to Les. Just for your own benefit, Colin, somebody said that they can't see the audio book on Amazon. Did you say earlier that it's going to be audio available?
I'll have to check with Philip, actually, Philip Mantle. He's the agent for the book. I know we have had an audio tape done, but
it's probably not ready then yet, people, but it's going to be. So I'll just hand it over to Les.
Just probably a couple of lines on this one. We've run out of time. And thanks for everybody for sending the questions. Patricia Adams Wright. Colin, after your encounter, did you have any physical symptoms?
Not really, no. That's a funny one. I did have something that came out of my stomach. Something not come out of my stomach, sorry. Something I passed in the toilet. And I took it to the doctors, and he'd never seen anything like it before in his life. He sent it off for analysis, and it got lost. And they sent me a letter from the doctors saying, unfortunately, your specimen has disappeared. But then 3 months later, they sent me a letter saying it had reappeared, and they didn't know what it was. The only other thing that happened was my daughter's ears bubbled up over the top here, looked like pizza crust. That happened probably a week or so after the event. We never could find what had caused it. It eventually disappeared of its own accord.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you short. Yeah, sorry to cut you short, Colin, but we are definitely out of time now. The 10p in the meter is nearly gone out, and we are going to lose the stream very, very shortly. So
Yep.
I've got to say to Paul to do his dutiful thing now.
No, it's all good, Les. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to Colin, and it's been great, Les. And thanks for the questions, everybody. From me, it's good night, and I'll just hand it to Les and Colin.
That's been great. Thank you for inviting me on, and thank you to everybody who's been listening tonight. I've really enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you. Right, it's over to me now. Sorry for the little low audio earlier on in the stream. I didn't see anything, any comments in there, but I only just picked it up later on. So apologies for that. But great guest on tonight, Colin Saunders. As you say, I put a link in the description of the Amazon book, page link, and also I think it'll be absolutely a fascinating read. I've got to thank Colin on behalf of Truth Proof, Paul Sinclair and myself, and I've got to wish you all a good night. But lastly, best to not leave this one out. Thanks to Alison for doing the moderating tonight. Great job, Alison. A couple of questions I didn't get out there, obviously. Sorry for that, I apologise. But the show, it's just the amount of information on there tonight from Colin was fantastic. We'll see you all next time.